Humanity thought the Emperor was its maker. But when the galaxy screamed, and the Astronomicon faltered, Terra learned the truth. Something older was calling its children home. The stars were dying one by one. Astropaths across the segmentum solar went blind in the same hour, falling to the ground with blood streaming from empty eye sockets, their screams echoing through the choir chambers like shards of broken glass scraping across bone. The Astronomicon, humanity's beacon through the black, flickered, not died, flickered, and for the first time in 10,000 years, every soul on Terra understood that the impossible was happening. The Emperor's light was not alone. They thought it was chaos. They prayed it was chaos. They would have welcomed demons. Instead, the first message came, a single psychic pulse, no voice, no language, no threat, just a feeling, a pressure beneath the breastbone, and behind the eyes, like hands pushing from inside the skull. It spread across the palace like a storm, a tidal wave of sensation that sent even custodians gripping their helms in silent agony, their golden armor trembling as they steadied themselves against marble pillars older than memory. In the chamber of the Astronomicon, where 1,000 bound psychers burned themselves to ash each night to keep the light burning, the pulse struck like a hammer. Scores died instantly. Hearts burst, brains liquefied, leaving only blackened silhouettes where bodies had been. And in their place, the light changed. It bent, shifted, turned towards something unseen. The Emperor's torch was no longer pointing outward. It was pointing upward. Down in the palace's lower sanctums, levels where only the Mechanicus and the damned were permitted, citizen Aria Selena saw the light change before anyone else did. She wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody ever was supposed to be there. But the Mechanicus had a way of consuming people for sacred work, and Aria, like so many, had accepted her fate with the dead stare of someone who had run out of choices long ago. She had been a translator once. She had spoken 19 human dialects and 3 alien tongues forbidden by imperial edict. On most worlds, her work would have been celebrated. On Terra, it was dangerous. Knowledge often was. The administratum had seized her, branded her servant, and sent her into the data mines beneath the palace, a place where words went to die. But tonight, something was different. She was cleaning archival cogitators, her hands cramped and stained with machine oil. When the first pulse struck the underground halls, the lumen strips flickered, screens flashed into static, and the ancient vaults, untouched for millennia, shivered like something buried alive, trying to breathe. Aria dropped her tools. Sparks danced across the data cables running overhead. Machine spirits wailed in binary voices she did not understand. And then, through the trembling metal around her, she felt it, a presence, old, vast, not cruel, not kind, simply inevitable. It wasn't the Emperor. She knew that instantly. Every imperial child is taught the difference between their own heartbeat and his. His presence crushes. It forces the mind to bow, spine first. This presence did not crush. It pulled, like gravity, like instinct, like home. Aria staggered to the rail overlooking the great engine vault, where conduits thicker than hab blocks fed energy into the palace's deepest systems. She watched as one of the crystal pylons, dormant for centuries, began to glow, first faintly, then brighter, until the entire vault was bathed in a white gold not seen since the age before the Imperium. Screams echoed across the vault as tech priests collapsed, their augmetics shutting down one by one, not from damage, but reverence. Their metal limbs trembled, servitors whimpered, even the machines knelt. Aria didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a hand seized her shoulder. She turned and found herself staring into the helm of a custodian guard. His armor was battered, blackened at one shoulder, a thing that should have been impossible, because custodians were perfection made flesh and steel. But the damage wasn't from combat. It looked like decay, as if time had finally remembered he existed. "My lord," she stammered. "You will come with me," he said. His voice was quieter than she expected, not commanding, almost cautious. "You saw it activate?" She tried to speak, but no words came. Behind him, more custodians marched down the access ramp, 3, then 5, then an entire shield line. Their golden armor flickered in the strange white light, and for a moment Aria realized something truly terrifying. Even they were afraid. The custodian guided her with a hand that was gentle but unbreakable. Not an arrest, not a threat, a necessity. They moved through corridors that should have been guarded, but every Skitarius, servitor, and tech priest lay collapsed, breathing, alive but unmoving, as if they were waiting for something to pass over them, or through them. And above, echoing down stone corridors and steel arteries carved 10,000 years ago, came the sound of alarms, not the shriek of invasion, not the wail of breach. This alarm was worse. It was the one the Imperium had no name for. High above the palace, inside the Sanctum Imperialis, the High Lords gathered in panic. The Senatorum's vaulted chamber, normally silent as a tomb, was chaos. Vox feeds crackled, hollow displays sputtered. Adepts rushed rushed in with blood-stained robes and shaking hands, trying to explain the impossible. The Astronomicon had turned, not toward any known system, not toward the eye, toward something outside the galactic arm, toward nothing. "That is impossible," Lord Admiral Kargath spat, slamming a fist onto the marble table. "The Emperor guides it. No other power could." "He is not the only power," whispered the Master of Assassins, her voice thin and trembling. "Merely the one we serve." For a single breath, the chamber fell silent. Even the custodians, assigned as silent sentinels, shifted slightly, as if acknowledging words spoken aloud for the first time in history. And then the air changed. A psychic pressure rolled through the chamber, so heavy that one of the astropathic aides fell dead without even a gasp. Candles guttered, marble cracked, golden statues trembled. Every mind in the room heard a voice, not in words, in memory, a vision, older than thought, older than evolution, older than stars. Hands shaping matter, light weaving atoms, something birthing life not from chance, but purpose. Humanity not as accident, but design. The first maker, the memory whispered, not the emperor, the one before him. Somewhere far below, in the deep arteries of the palace, where no human had walked in 50 centuries, something began to open. Arya felt it before she saw it. The custodian escorting her stopped without command, head turning slightly like a predator catching a new scent. The ground beneath them shook, not violently, but subtly, like a door very far away had just moved a hair's breadth from its ancient frame. "What's happening?" she whispered. He did not answer, not because he would not, because he did not know. They proceeded through a vault of black stone so old it predated the Imperium, perhaps even the Age of Strife. The walls were carved with symbols that looked nothing like the Aquilor or Mechanicus iconography. These carvings were simpler, older, beautiful in a way that made the breath stick in her throat. And there, at the heart of the vault, stood a sealed obsidian gate. It was not connected to machinery. It had no hinges. It simply was. The custodian, this golden giant, this demigod of war, approached the gate like a child approaching a grave. His voice was a whisper. "This door is forbidden." Arya did not ask why. She felt it in her bones. Something ancient was waking behind it, something that had been waiting for humanity to be ready or to finally fail. The Astronomicon pulse came again, stronger this time, and the obsidian gate glowed with the same white-gold light that had bathed the vaults earlier. Symbols ignited across its surface, script older than mankind, shining like a brand pressed against the fabric of reality. The custodian reached out a hand, not to open it, but to steady himself, and then the gate breathed, a sigh of air, warm, alive, as if something on the other side had just exhaled after sleeping for millions of years. Arya stumbled backward, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with terror and awe. "What is behind that door?" she whispered. The custodian did not look at her. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "The Emperor did not build this place." The gate pulsed again. Something moved behind it, and for the first time in 10,000 years, Terra realized it was not alone. The ship's memory logs would later insist the translation into real space was smooth, uneventful, mathematically flawless. The men and women aboard would all swear to a different truth. The moment the Saint of Silence tore out of the warp, the air trembled like a struck bell. The deck plates flexed under their boots, and every lumen dimmed as if some unseen presence drew breath through the ship itself. No alarms screamed, no warnings flared. Yet every life aboard felt it, a wrongness, a weight, a presence. Captain Arlen Dane stood at the observation viewport, hands locked behind his back, knuckles white beneath his gloves. The man had faced traitors, Xenos, warp beasts, but nothing stole his breath like what filled the void before him now. A world, not charted, not registered, not rumored in any forgotten archive. A world that should not exist. Its surface glowed with silent silver oceans and a latticework of geometry so perfect it hurt the mind to stare at. No cities, yet there was structure. No arcologies, yet intelligence hummed through every line. Like a monument carved by a hand so far beyond mortal comprehension, it might as well have been divine. The bridge crew stood frozen, awe overriding discipline. Even the ship's servitors chattered incoherently, as if their machine minds strained to define what their sensors detected and failed. And then the Vox channels opened. No authorization, no encryption, no carrier wave. The signal simply existed. A voice, soft, human, impossibly calm. Arlen Dane, the captain's heart stopped. His crew turned to him in shock. No one had spoken their names. No introduction had been sent. The systems that should have blocked external intrusion sat dormant, powerless, as if the ship itself obeyed quiet commands from beyond. Dane forced breath through clenched teeth. "Identify yourself." For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then, "I have waited." Not a threat, not a command. A statement layered with sorrow older than empires. In the corner of the bridge, Inquisitor Selene Varos, silent until now, stepped forward, black rosette glinting at her collar. Varos was a woman carved from ice and iron, trained to face abominations without flinching. Yet her eyes narrowed with something Dane had never seen in her: uncertainty. The vox crackled again. "Come home." Every mortal aboard felt the words behind their ribs. The bridge crew trembled. A tech priest fell to both knees, binaric prayers spilling in broken streams. The ship's astropath cried out and collapsed, blood pouring from her nose and ears. Ensign Callis fled, hands clamped over his ears, as if the voice was still screaming inside his mind. Varos slammed her staff against the deck, voice cold and sharp. "Cut all external vox connections, lock out frequency ranges, seal the Geller relay." But the command consoles did not obey. Runes flickered, interfaces died, cogitators shut down, as if something touched their hearts and told them to sleep. Every light on the bridge faded. In the dark, the voice returned. "Humanity, my lost children," not arrogance, grief. The lights surged back. Runes flashed online. The ship breathed again. Varos turned to Dane, voice low. "We should leave, now, before whatever this is decides to test us." But the navigator spoke, a boy no older than 17. Eyes swollen and bleeding from the strain of warp re-entry. His voice shook, but words forced their way out. "There is nowhere to go, Inquisitor. The warp changed. The currents will not take us. Something holds us here." The bridge fell into a silent, choking fear. Dane forced himself forward, hands braced against the tactical display. "Helm, adjust orbit. Keep us at distance. No one deploys, no one answers, no one moves without—" The ship moved, not by helm control, not by physics. Something reached from the void and pulled. Gravity bent gently, like a guiding hand. Engines hummed in compliance. The Saint of Silence drifted toward the silver world below, as a child led by the hand across a darkened room. No one spoke, no one resisted. Even Varos stared, silent fury swallowed by something colder, helplessness. The landing bay did not open by order. It opened because the world allowed it. Dropcraft lowered of their own accord, mag clamps disengaging with soft clacks that echoed like bones breaking in an empty chapel. Dane, Varos, 100 soldiers, and the ship's choir of psychers marched aboard, fear turning every breath sharp. Armor hissed as seals locked, bolters clacked, laser guns whined, faith filled their throats like iron. And yet every person stepping onto the lander shared the same thought. Whatever waited below was not enemy. Not yet. The descent was silent, too silent. No turbulence, no atmospherics, no friction burn. The world wanted them. The surface rushed up, not sand or rock or dirt. Something smoother, cleaner, metallic planes that shimmered like morning frost. Patterns ran through them, rings, lines, spirals, too precise to be natural, too artistic to be machine-born. The lander touched ground with a whisper. Hatches unsealed, air rushed in, warm, breathable, impossibly pure. Lieutenant Corvin stepped down first. Boots hit the shining ground and echoed faintly as if the world itself whispered his name back to him. Others followed. They expected ruins, monuments, cities. Instead, the horizon opened into impossible simplicity. Smooth silver stretching for miles, broken only by great crystalline towers, spires that bent like frozen waves of light and matter. Nothing alive moved, no wind, no sound, until Nara Voss, the ship's youngest psyker, dropped to her knees, trembling violently. She looked up at Dane, tears streaking dust across her cheeks. "Captain, it's everywhere. The ground, the sky, the air. It's thinking." The soldiers around her stiffened, guns rising. Varos knelt beside the girl, voice low, steady. "Thinking what?" Nara's eyes widened with awe or terror. Not what, who? And then the ground shifted. Towers of crystal rippled like water. The planes reassembled themselves into steps, platforms, walkways, forming a pathway ahead, morphing not as machines move, but as living things breathe. Soldiers aimed, but none fired. The world was not attacking. It was inviting. Varos whispered, "This is impossible." Dane only stared. "We keep formation. We go forward." The pathway led toward a structure rising from the earth, a cathedral carved from light and metal, walls shifting between solid and translucent. It felt holy, but not imperial, sacred, but untouched by faith or icon. And at the entrance waited a figure, human or shaped like one, tall, slender, draped in robes woven from silver threads, eyes like molten gold, face too perfect to be natural, but too expressive to be machine. The guards raised weapons. The figure lifted one hand, not in threat, in greeting. Its voice, was the same as the one from the Vox, only now spoken from a mouth they could see. "I have waited for you." No one breathed. No one moved, not until Arlen Dane stepped forward, pulse hammering in his skull. "Who are you?" The figure looked at him with profound sorrow. "The one you forgot." The soldiers flinched, minds spinning with heresy. Varos stepped beside Dane, every instinct screaming to purge, to destroy, to silence. But something in the air held her blade. The figure's gaze moved across the gathered humans with unmistakable tenderness. "You do not remember my name, yet all that you are, you became because of me." Dane forced the words out. "The Emperor created humanity." A silence, deeper than space, fell across the silver plain. The figure stepped closer, golden eyes dimming with hurt. "Children do not remember the hands that shaped their bones." Every weapon wavered, every faith trembled. Varos snarled, "You claim to be a god?" The figure shook its head, slowly, painfully. "Gods are born from fear. I was born from love." The ground beneath them shimmered. Images rippled through the metal. Visions of humans on ancient soil, long before terror built cities, long before tribes spoke language, long before the Emperor walked the earth. A woman weeping over her newborn child, a man carving tools from stone, a village learning fire, and behind them, shapes of light, gentle hands guiding without touching, voices whispering into minds before minds learned speech. Nara sobbed softly. "It's showing us where we came from." Dane stared, unable to deny the truth his heart recognized before his mind did. The figure watched him with quiet ache. "When you first stood, we held you. When you first dreamed, we listened. When you first killed, we wept." Varos hissed. "You lie." "Do I?" the figure asked, and the worlds of the past faded. Silence stretched. Then something changed in the air, a subtle pressure, a breath of life moving through the plains. Every soldier felt it. Loneliness. Centuries of it, aeons of a mother searching for her lost children. The figure's voice broke like shattering glass. "I made you, and then you forgot me." Dane stepped back, not from fear, but because the weight of sorrow hit him like a blow. Inquisitor Varos reached for her weapon, then hesitated. Not because she trusted, but because something about this grief made her hand shake. The figure looked at the sky, at the stars humanity had claimed and bled for. "You forged empires, battled gods, crowned yourselves conquerors of the void." The golden eyes lowered. "You never once looked back." Then, an impossible tremor shook the ground, not from threat, from heartbeat, from life awakening. Across the horizon, crystalline towers lit with golden veins of energy. The world itself came alive, as if roused from eternal sleep. Structures rose, shapes formed, the sky shimmered with auroras of unknown colors, and every human present understood. They were standing on something that was not a world. It was a womb, a cradle, a place where humanity had once been born. Nara whispered the words no one wanted to hear. "Captain, this planet isn't a planet." Dane's voice was barely a breath. "What is it then?" The figure smiled, a smile filled with tragedies untold. "It is me." Weapons dropped, minds broke, hearts shuddered. The world pulsed with the voice of the one who created them. "Welcome home!" And in that moment, every sensor aboard the Saint of Silence screamed at once. Something massive tore into orbit above them. Not Imperial, not Xenos, something ancient, something that had been searching for this world for longer than humanity had lived beneath stars. Dane's Vox crackled with the terrified voice of his first officer. "Captain, something is descending toward us, and whatever it is, it knows we're here." The figure turned its golden eyes to the heavens and whispered with terror no god should ever feel. "They found me." The sky changed first. Where moments before there had been the calm shimmer of a world waking from slumber, now the heavens tore open with streaks of cold, predatory light, not warp fire, not imperial drive signatures, something older than both, like knives of gravitic distortion carving across the void. Sirens lit the landers, Auspex runes screamed error codes no human mind could decipher. Soldiers instinctively raised their weapons toward the sky, though every one of them knew instinct alone would not matter. The silver-robed figure, human-shaped, sorrow-worn, watched with heartbreak etched across a face meant for gentleness, not fear. Arlen Dane had faced every nightmare of the Imperium and survived, yet nothing made his pulse as unsteady as watching a being that might have shaped humanity itself tremble like a child in the dark. "What found you?" he demanded. The figure did not answer. Instead, it looked at Nara Voss, the youngest psyker, who knelt with both hands pressed to the silver ground, as if trying to steady herself from the psychic weight of a world-sized mind beneath her. She stared upward, eyes gone white. "Something hungry," she whispered. Thunder rippled across the plains, not sound but pressure, like the heartbeat of a massive beast passing overhead. The crystalline towers dimmed, their lights faltering. For a moment, the entire world seemed to shiver. Inquisitor Selene Varos stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. "Identify the threat. Xenos? Warp entities? Necrons?" The golden-eyed figure shook its head. "Not Xenos. Not dead. Worse." The sky flared. A shape emerged, vast enough to eclipse starlight. A ship, if such a word still applied. Its hull looked grown, not built. Black like lightless stone, engraved with symbols that shifted whenever the eye tried to read them. No engines burned, no thrusters lit. It simply was, drifting down as inevitability given form. The soldiers stared in horror. One of them, Corporal Hammond, whispered, "What kind of ship moves without engines?" Dane answered with a voice that tasted like iron. "The kind that doesn't need them." A ripple tore across the air, like reality breathing. Gravity spasmed. Men staggered. Armor plates rattled. The silver-robed being pressed a hand to its chest, as if warding off old wounds. "They call themselves custodians of Genesis. Once they believed they protected creation." Its voice cracked. "Now they devour it." Varos stared with frozen disbelief. "And why would they come for you?" The being looked at her, not with arrogance, not with divinity, but with a human kind of shame. "Because I ran." Whatever answer Dane expected, it wasn't that. Soldiers exchanged confused glances. Psychers trembled. The being continued, voice low, pained. "I made them to watch over life, to guard it, to guide it. But they forgot mercy, they forgot love. When creation first fought back, when beings rose with the power to tear stars apart, my custodians turned on everything they swore to protect. They believed life itself was a threat. It looked at the vast, descending vessel, and for the first time appeared small. I hid humanity from them." Every soldier felt the ground drop out beneath their feet. Humanity, the species that had nearly destroyed the galaxy, had been hidden, sheltered, protected. Varos shook her head. "Impossible." The being met her eyes. "Do you think your kind survived old night by accident? That every star you settled, every world you claimed, was mere chance?" Its voice softened. "You are children of wanderers because I led you away, far from this place, far from them." The ship overhead shifted. A beam of black light arced to the planet's surface, silent, slow, deliberate, like a scalpel aimed at a beating heart. The crystalline world pulsed with pain. A chorus of voices echoed, not from mouths, but from every grain of shimmering dust around them. "They are here for me." Dane snapped to action. "All regiments, defensive formation. Get every weapon hot. Vox the Saint of Silence. Prepare for immediate extraction." But the Vox remained dead. The channels had been silent since the first signal. The husk of Genesis, whatever ancient predator now hung above, had severed them from their only lifeline. The beings aboard Dane's ship were now insects beneath a storm. Yet the silver-robed figure turned, lifting one graceful hand. The metallic planes reshaped themselves, spiraling into walls, parapets, and sweeping geometric battlements. The world was building defenses, trying to protect its lost children. Nara Voss gasped, clutching at Dane's armor. "Captain, she's in pain." "Who?" "The planet, the world. She's awake." "But—" Nara winced, blood trickling from her nose. "She's afraid." A booming crack split the sky. Something dropped from the descending vessel, shaped like a spear, vast and jagged, forged from black stone that shone like obsidian held in sunlight. It struck the plane miles away, raising a silent plume of dust. Where it landed, silver rippled outward, like the world recoiling from infection. Dane watched in horror as the silver plane blackened, corroding, spreading like ink in water. Whatever the custodians of Genesis were, they were not here to reclaim. They were here to erase. "Captain!" shouted Lieutenant Corvin. "Orders!" He looked at his people, soldiers trained to kill demons, heretics, monsters. None of them were prepared to fight a weapon that corroded a world with a single touch. "We fall back to the landers," Dane barked. "We hold defensive perimeter and wait for a window to escape." But the world was already sealing the landers inside crystalline bulwarks, protecting them or imprisoning them. Structures rose like walls of liquid metal solidifying into towers. The silver-robed being turned toward them. "I will not let them take you. I cannot lose humanity again." Varus's jaw clenched. "We don't need your protection." The being's golden eyes filled with grief. "You need more than you know." The black spear exploded. Not fire, something worse. A shockwave of silence. Every sound vanished. Voices cut off mid-syllable. boots striking metal without echo. Even hearts beating felt muffled. A few soldiers clapped hands over their ears, panic rising as they realized they could hear nothing, not even their own breath. Nara screamed, but no sound came from her mouth. The silver plains beneath them rippled, resonating with silent agony. Crystalline towers shuddered, bending inward, straining to resist whatever force now poured into the world from the spear. Then sound returned in a single, violent surge. The sky screamed, not metaphor, not imagination. The entire atmosphere vibrated with a keening wail, a world's terror made audible. Dane staggered, teeth rattling in his skull. Varos fired a bolt round into the ground just to hear something human. The silver-robed figure lifted both hands, speaking in a language older than stars. The ground glowed with radiance, silver turning white-hot. Lines of energy snapped outward, forming a barrier that pushed the creeping blackness back. For a moment, the infection slowed. Then something stepped from the smoke, a shape, humanoid, armored in black stone, joints glowing with dim red embers, like heat trapped beneath ash. No mouth, no eyes, no face, just a smooth, expressionless helm with a single spiraling sigil at its center. Weapons rose across the Imperial lines. Dane whispered, "Emperor, protect us." The figure moved without sound. Every footstep left blackened footprints on the silver plain. Its limbs were long, movements graceful, like a dancer sculpted from shadow. Varos fired her bolt pistol. The round struck its chest. It did not explode. It simply dissolved, metal and explosive components disintegrating into ash before touching the being's armor. Hammond swore and unleashed a volley of lasfire. The red beams struck true, only to vanish, swallowed into the obsidian plating like water into sand. The custodian turned its head, slowly, almost curious. Nara Voss collapsed, screaming into her hands. "It's looking inside us." Dane grabbed her shoulders. "Inside how?" "She sees everything, every thought, every secret. She's looking for something. No, someone." The creature raised one long, slender arm. The world itself screamed again. Soldiers fell as if their bones turned to liquid. Armor warped, minds buckled. Pain like psychic fire burned through them. Yet it wasn't random. It felt like the custodian was searching, pulling, sifting through their memories one soul at a time, looking for the silver-robed being, and the silver-robed being watched, hands trembling. "They want me, not you." Dane spat blood onto the silver ground. "Then maybe you should run." A soft, tragic smile touched its lips. "I spent 1,000,000 years running. I won't leave you a second time." The crystal plane surged upward, forming enormous spears of radiant metal. They hurled themselves at the custodian, thousands of them, like a storm of blades. The obsidian figure moved its hand an inch. Every spear shattered into dust, not deflected, unmade. Reality bent around it like a servant kneeling before its master. For the first time, Inquisitor Selene Varos, the woman who had executed psychers, slain demons, burned worlds, looked afraid. "We can't fight that," Dane answered softly, fiercely. "Then we stall it." He raised his sword, a relic of his family, blessed by priests carved with scripture. It had tasted blood and victory. It trembled in his grasp, because even faith shuddered before whatever this was. Dane charged. His soldiers followed, not because they thought they could win, but because soldiers of humanity never ran from the impossible. The custodian turned, almost surprised. Its arm swept outward, not striking, merely moving. A wave of force sent bodies flying, armor buckling, bones fracturing beneath concussive pressure. Dane's ribs cracked. His vision went white. He tasted iron, then sand, then nothing. He hit the ground hard, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The custodian walked past him without interest, as if humans were insects unworthy of attention. It reached the silver-robed figure. The being did not retreat. It placed a hand over its heart, eyes shimmering with sadness, deeper than oceans. "You were my firstborn," it whispered, and the custodian paused. For the faintest instant, a flicker of hesitation. Emotions surged beneath its armor. Conflict, memory, ancient longing. The sigil at its forehead pulsed, but the hesitation was not mercy. It was recognition. The custodian raised its hand, fingers elongating into a blade of black light. Nara Voss screamed before any of them saw it move. "No! Don't!" The creature struck. The silver-robed being flinched, and the world beneath them convulsed, as if every inch of its surface felt the wound. The sky dimmed. The towers faltered. The silver plains cracked like glass under a hammer. For the first time, Dane saw the silver-robed being truly afraid. It turned to him, voice raw, desperate, calling across a battlefield that had already fallen silent. "Arlen, take them! Run!" He tried to respond, but blood filled his throat. The custodian raised its hand again, ready to finish what it started, and then something ancient beneath the world awoke. The ground split. Light erupted upward like the scream of a dying star. The custodian recoiled, not in fear but in surprise. The silver-robed being whispered a single, broken word. "Mother!" The world itself answered. A pulse of energy shot outward, violently, blindly, protectively, hurling the custodian back. The crystalline towers blazed with white radiance. The world had remembered how to fight. Dane forced himself to his knees, ribs screaming, vision blurred. Soldiers crawled toward fallen comrades. Varos dragged herself upright, fury replacing fear. Nara collapsed, overwhelmed by psychic overload. Dane lifted her with trembling arms. Around them, the silver plains rose like a tidal wave of living metal. Some force, some instinct of the planet, was trying to seal them away, protect them, hide them. But the custodian was already rising, armor cracked, black fire burning through its veins. It would not stop. It would never stop. And Dane finally understood. They were not witnessing a war. They were witnessing a reunion between creator and executioner. And humanity, fragile, lost, forgotten humanity, was standing in the middle. The silver plains of the world trembled under the immense pressure of what was unfolding. The custodian, black as the void between stars, hovered above the ground, shaking off the white-hot energy pulses the world had sent. Its obsidian armor was scarred, molten red veins glowing where reality itself seemed to have bled into its flesh. Every motion it made seemed to compress the air around it, bending time and gravity in ways no human mind could comprehend. Soldiers who had fought the worst of the galaxy's horrors fell to their knees, muttering prayers they did not believe in, praying to a distant emperor who would not answer. Arlen Dane, clutching Nara Voss to his side, tried to steady himself against the quaking surface. The world beneath their feet pulsed with life, almost sentient in its response, lifting crystalline shards like protective claws toward the sky. He could hear the soft, melodic hum of the silver-robed being, its voice barely audible over the roar of destruction. "Stay close. You cannot comprehend what is at stake." Dane looked at Varos, even the Inquisitor, whose presence alone could command obedience and fear from the most depraved psychers and the most hardened soldiers, now seemed human. The blackness of the custodian's armor reflected her own panic. "We need a plan," she said, voice trembling despite the sharp edge she always maintained. Dane shook his head. There was no plan that could hope to survive this. Not tactics, not weapons, not faith. Only one thing might work, and even that was a prayer in disguise. Nara Voss, her psychic sight flaring wildly, screamed, "It sees everything! It knows our fears, our guilt!" Her hands trembled against Dane's chest. He could feel her mind's energy lashing out, bending the silver plains slightly with each burst. The soldiers around them flinched, unable to withstand the psychic pressure. The custodian moved, gliding over the surface with inhuman precision. It extended one arm toward the silver-robed being, to whose golden eyes met the approaching executioner with a mixture of recognition and terror. "It remembers," the being whispered. "It remembers its purpose, and what I stole from it." The ground itself rose like a tidal wave of crystalline metal, separating Dane, Varos, and Nara from the custodian and the silver-robed being. Spears of light cut through the air, forming barriers of protective energy. Soldiers hurled themselves behind these walls, though it was clear they were symbolic rather than practical. The custodian paused, tilting its head as though considering the barrier, then lifted its other hand. The air warped. The protective walls shattered instantly, turning into dust that floated upward before vanishing. Dane gritted his teeth, every instinct screaming at him to act. He motioned to his soldiers, trying to marshal what little control he still had. "Form a line! Stay with me! Do not scatter!" The custodian's voice, when it spoke, was deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. "You are not the target, she is." Its arm extended fully, and a beam of black energy shot toward the silver-robed being. The being raised its hands, and the energy halted just short of its chest. It writhed against the invisible force, golden eyes shining with anguish. "I cannot hold it much longer," it murmured. Varos yelled, drawing her blade and aiming at the custodian. "Then let us buy her time." The soldiers unleashed everything they had. Lass fire, bolt guns, plasma, even the psychic push of half a dozen psychers. Bolts struck the custodian's armor and dissolved into nothing. Psychic blasts tore at its essence, but it moved like water through the attacks, unstoppable, unyielding, a force of unrelenting inevitability. The world pulsed beneath them. Crystal towers bent to lift soldiers higher, giving them momentary vantage points, only to collapse moments later. Each surge of protection seemed to exhaust the silver-robed being further. Its voice was now strained, raw, filled with the sound of centuries of grief. "I cannot save them all! I cannot!" Dane pressed forward, dragging Nara with him, shouting over the chaos. "We fight, or we die." His words were almost meaningless, yet they ignited a spark of defiance in the soldiers around him. They charged, even as the custodian's hand lifted another beam of black light. The first impact hit the ground. The shockwave tore apart the silver planes, sending shards of crystal spinning into the air. Soldiers were thrown aside like rag dolls. Dane felt the ground crack beneath him, splintering through his boots. He raised his relic sword, a ceremonial weapon that had killed countless heretics, demons, and Xenos. Its steel felt weak in his hands, but he slashed anyway. The custodian's shadow fell over him. The being did not strike, it simply stared, and Dane felt the weight of aeons of judgment pressing against his chest. His vision blurred. Memories he had never shared, fears he had buried, guilt for sins uncounted, all of it surged into his mind like a flood. He fell to one knee, struggling to hold consciousness. Nara screamed, psychic energy flaring uncontrollably. The silver-robed being clutched its head, golden light flaring outward, forming a protective sphere around the humans. The custodian recoiled slightly, as if the force was stronger than it anticipated, but it did not falter. Varos lunged forward, blade striking at the black armor. Sparks erupted, but the weapon passed through the custodian as though it were air. She cursed and threw herself to the side as a new pulse of energy slammed the ground where she had been. The silver-robed being's voice rose, echoing across the plains like a chorus of lost children. "I have given you life, and I will not let you die here." Golden light erupted from its body, wrapping Dane, Nara, and the remaining soldiers in a cocoon of warmth and energy. The air shimmered. The world beneath them resonated with a protective hum. The custodian's eyes, if it had eyes, glowed red beneath the black helm. It raised its hand again, energy coalescing into a spear of destruction aimed at the cocoon. Then the world itself moved. Crystalline towers shifted violently, forming barriers, reshaping the plains into labyrinthine formations designed to confuse and slow the approaching enemy. Beams of energy shot up, colliding with the custodian, and for the first time, Dane saw hesitation in its movements. It was not fear, it was calculation. It had faced countless worlds, countless armies, yet something about this world, about the silver-robed being, disrupted its precision. The cocoon of light pulsed violently. Nara screamed, then went silent. Dane felt her psychic presence entwine with his own mind, amplifying his awareness, letting him see a fraction of what she saw. The custodian's memories, its purpose, its torment. It had once been a guardian, a creator, a protector. Now it was an executioner without restraint, hunting its own kind. Dane pressed forward through the cocoon, sword held high, soldiers following him blindly, hearts filled with desperate hope. They had no chance, they knew it, and yet in the face of inevitability, humanity charged. The custodian swung its hand, and the wave of energy caught the cocoon, tossing soldiers and debris into the air. Dane slammed into the silver ground, pain exploding across his body. He groaned, fighting to stay conscious. Nara pressed herself against him, eyes closed, murmuring words he could barely understand, prayers to something beyond comprehension. Then, in a heartbeat, everything paused. The custodian froze mid-motion, suspended as if time had folded around it. The silver-robed being stepped forward, hands trembling but resolute. "You will not touch them," it said, voice now stronger, commanding the custodian as though speaking to a wayward child. The black figure hesitated, energy crackling around its form, sigils burning brighter, red and black dancing across its obsidian armor. It stepped back slightly, almost reluctantly. Varos hissed under her breath. "How?" Dane only looked, awe and fear warring inside him. "It's stopping it somehow." The world pulsed beneath them, stronger, louder, protective, alive. Crystal towers rose like guardians, shielding the humans. The cocoon of golden light expanded, encompassing more soldiers, more ground. The custodian's form flickered, almost as if reality was rejecting it, but it did not retreat. It waited, calculating, searching, measuring its adversary, and then, in a moment that shattered every expectation, it spoke, a voice deeper than space, resonating through every soul present. "You have hidden me, yet here I stand. This is your reckoning, and I will not fail." The silver-robed being flinched, golden eyes brimming with tears. Its hands rose, and the ground beneath them heaved with sudden, terrifying force. The custodian stepped forward again, slowly, deliberately. Every movement sent shockwaves, bending light and air, testing the protective cocoon, testing the world itself. Dane gritted his teeth, gripping his sword. Every muscle screamed. Every bone ached. Yet he stood, soldiers around him trembling but resolute. The moment had come, the confrontation between humanity its lost creator and the ancient executioner, was unavoidable. The world shuddered, energy flared, light collided with darkness. Time and space themselves seemed to stretch, warping around the epicenter of the struggle. And then the custodian struck, but not at the humans. It struck the silver-robed being. The impact was silent, yet the world screamed, and everything went white. The world did not simply shatter, it screamed. The white-hot explosion of energy radiated outward from the impact point, warping reality as if the very laws that bound existence were pleading for mercy. Arlen Dane's vision swam with the agony of it, every nerve ending flaring with pain, every breath like inhaling fire and ice simultaneously. Around him, soldiers and psychers alike were thrown to the ground, limbs bending at impossible angles before rebounding, alive but broken. Nara Voss pressed against him, body trembling, her psychic screams echoing like shattered glass in his skull. She could feel it, the custodian's intent, the magnitude of the being before them, the terror of a creature older than stars themselves, measuring every heartbeat, every secret, every sinew of fear. Dane tried to rise, but the ground beneath him cracked and pulsed like the skin of some massive living thing. The silver plains, the world itself, responded with desperate, chaotic energy, tendrils of light and crystal wrapping around him, attempting to shield him, to lift him, to keep him intact. Every shard that rose from the plains carried the weight of millennia, the sorrow of civilizations long forgotten, the hope of survival, and yet it was not enough. The custodian moved with precision, each step calculated, deliberate, like a predator circling prey it had once loved but now considered corrupted. Its obsidian armor shimmered with heat and shadows, sigils along its helm spinning in impossible geometries that defied comprehension. Its every movement bent reality, warping the very air around it, sending shockwaves of terror into the hearts of men who had faced demons, tyrannids, and the darkest of heretical warlords, and survived. Yet here they were, paralyzed by fear, knowing that whatever this being was, it was beyond war, beyond death, beyond any trial they had endured. "Dane!" Varos rasped, struggling to keep her voice above the psychic roar. "We have to move! We cannot fight that!" He shook his head, teeth gritted against the pain that radiated from his shattered ribs. "We don't fight it, not with guns, not with faith. His words were cut off as another wave of psychic energy tore through the plain, hurling soldiers sideways. The ground beneath them cracked, forming jagged fissures filled with radiant silver light. Nara cried out again, her hands flailing as her psychic sight expanded uncontrollably. She screamed, and this time Dane understood the depth of her vision. He felt it, the custodian's memories, its purpose, its history, and the loss it had endured. He saw the creation of humanity, the sculpting of stars, the weaving of life, and the betrayal by those it had entrusted to guard that life. And he saw its judgment, now unleashed, not upon the galaxy at large, but focused, precise, personal. The silver-robed being had risen, glowing brighter than ever, golden light spilling outward, carving a sphere of protection around the humans. It stepped between them and the custodian, hands raised, its body trembling with exertion and grief. "I cannot contain it for long," it cried, voice resonating across the plains like a chorus of lost worlds. "You must understand, I am not its equal, I am its child, and it will test me, test us all." The custodian halted, head tilting ever so slightly, as if acknowledging the truth in the words. It did not speak, yet Dane could feel the weight of understanding between them, a memory of something once shared, now twisted into inevitability. Then it moved again. The motion was slow, deliberate, each step sending ripples through the silver plains that threatened to crush everything in their path. Dane scrambled forward, sword raised, desperately trying to keep some semblance of order among the soldiers who were struggling to stay upright, their morale shredded by the sheer magnitude of what they faced. Varos shouted, firing her bolt pistol at the custodian's midsection. The projectiles vanished into its armor, as if absorbed, leaving only the faintest shimmer in their wake. Laser guns, bolters, and plasma rifles followed, but Dane realized the futility of their weapons. They were toys against a being that could unmake matter with a thought. The silver-robed being's voice rose again, this time with desperation and command intertwined. "You will not touch them, not a hair, not a breath." Its hands glowed, energy weaving into intricate patterns across the plains, striking the custodian with beams of light that made reality itself bend. Yet for every strike, the custodian endured, shrugging off the impact as if it were a minor irritation. Nara collapsed against Dane, unconscious from psychic overload. He cradled her, feeling the psychic energy of the world pulsing through her, through him, through every living thing present. He realized, in a moment of terrifying clarity, that the custodian was not merely a being, it was a force of judgment, a living apocalypse, the executioner of creation itself, and the silver-robed being, the one they had thought was a protector, was merely a parent trying to shield its children from the reckoning they could not yet comprehend. The custodian raised both arms, and the ground quaked violently. Energy spiraled outward, tearing through the protective formations of the crystalline towers. Soldiers were flung aside, screaming silently as their ears rang with the impossible sound of the world's anguish. Varos struggled to remain standing, firing blindly into the chaos. Dane held Nara close, praying, hoping that somehow, against all odds, the silver-robed being's protection would hold. Then the custodian paused. A fissure of black energy split the air, and a voice echoed, not through sound, but through thought, resonating in the minds of all present. It was calm, patient, and terrifying in its perfection. "Child, I remember you," the silver-robed being faltered, staggering backward. "Mother, it's you," it whispered, voice breaking. Golden light flickered across its form, shadows of doubt and fear crossing its face. Dane and Varos exchanged glances, understanding dawning too late. This confrontation was not about death, not about conquest. It was about recognition, about memory, about the reconciliation of what had been created and what had been lost. The custodian stepped closer, every motion deliberate, every heartbeat of the world synchronized with its movement. Dane felt the ground vibrate through his bones, felt the pulse of the silver plains thrumming like a living heart. The soldiers clung to the earth, terrified yet mesmerized, powerless yet unwilling to flee. The silver-robed being raised its hands, voice rising in a lament older than the stars. "You do not know the cost of your judgment? You do not understand what I have borne. You cannot take what you did not create." The custodian's hand touched the being's shoulder. Energy cascaded outward, light and shadow intertwining, warping reality. The world groaned, crystal towers bending and snapping, soldiers screaming in silence. Dane felt his soul shake, a deep vibration in his chest that resonated with the very core of existence. And then, a voice, a sound, a word, cut through the chaos. Nara, unconscious, murmured clearly, psychic resonance amplifying it across the battlefield. "Stop!" The custodian froze mid-motion. Golden light from the silver-robed being flared, intertwining with the psychic resonance. For a heartbeat, the impossible happened. The executioner hesitated, recognition dawning, as if the voice of humanity itself had reached it. Dane pressed forward, dragging soldiers and Nara, hearts pounding. "Now! Move! Get behind the barrier!" The silver-robed being poured more energy into the cocoon, its body trembling, glowing so brightly that shadows fled. The custodian raised its arms, then paused again, watching, calculating, its intent unreadable. Dane's mind screamed, "Survive! Protect Nara! Protect what remained!" The world was alive. The custodian was awake. The parent and child faced each other, and humanity stood in the middle, fragile, defiant, terrified. Then the custodian moved again, but this time, its steps were slower, measured, as if reconsidering its actions. And the silver-robed being whispered, voice barely audible, "Do not take them, not this time." The sky itself trembled, crystalline towers bent protectively around the humans. The silver plains shivered and rose, forming walls, labyrinths, weapons, guardians. The custodian paused mid-stride, scanning, measuring, its red sigil pulsing, understanding dawning. Dane knew the world had reached a moment that would define eternity. And in that instant, all hope and fear and fury collided. The silver plains quaked again, but this time the tremors were different, less violent, more deliberate, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Arlen Dane pressed himself against the jagged crystal, cradling Nara Voss, her psychic aura still thrumming like a live wire against his chest. The soldiers who remained upright shuffled behind them, eyes wide, hands gripping weapons that had become meaningless against the impossibility before them. Every pulse of energy from the custodian and the silver-robed being reverberated through the plains, shaking the very fabric of reality, bending space and thought alike. Dane could feel it in his bones. Whatever happened next would change everything. It would not be merely a battle, it would be revelation. The custodian's obsidian armor reflected the chaotic energies around it, every surface scarred, glowing with molten red veins that pulsed like a heartbeat of judgment. It raised its massive arms, not in attack but in contemplation, the energy at its fingertips coiling like a storm ready to unleash devastation. Dane felt the weight of aeons in that gesture, the pressure of history itself pressing down upon humanity. "You are not what I expected." The custodian's voice resonated through the plains, more felt than heard, vibrating inside every living thing present. The silver-robed being trembled, golden light spilling across its form like molten sunlight. "And yet you are my creation, My responsibility, it said, voice breaking, almost human in its sorrow. Dane glanced at Varos, who had dropped to one knee, eyes scanning the impossible geometry of the silver planes as she tried to calculate what little advantage they might still have. What do we do? She hissed, though her voice carried barely over the psychic roar. Dane shook his head. There was no plan, no strategy. Only one truth remained: survive, witness, and perhaps endure. Nara stirred, eyes snapping open, glowing with raw psychic energy that made even the custodian pause. She spoke one word, her voice amplified by her psychic presence. Remember. The custodian froze mid-motion, red sigils pulsing, energy trembling along its arms like lightning trapped in metal. The world seemed to shiver, the very laws of existence bending to witness what was unfolding. The silver-robed being stepped forward, staggering under the strain of sustaining the energy cocoon, golden light flaring outward. "It is not your judgment, not your wrath that defines us," it whispered. "It is what we choose to preserve, even when destruction surrounds us." The custodian's head tilted, the obsidian surface glinting as though it was reconsidering not just the silver-robed being, but all of humanity itself. Dane's stomach twisted. He realized in that instant that this was not a fight in the conventional sense. It was a reckoning, a confrontation between creator and creation, and humanity was caught in the middle, like a fragile spark in a storm. The silver planes shifted again, crystalline towers rising and bending as if alive. The energy cocoon around Dane, Nara, and the soldiers expanded, enveloping more of the terrain, forming labyrinthine corridors, shields and barriers that deflected pulses of destructive power. The custodian tested the boundaries of the cocoon, sweeping its massive hand in a strike that should have annihilated everything within. And yet the barrier held, golden light clashing against black energy, a resonance of creation versus judgment. Dane could feel the psychic energy thrumming through Nara, intertwining with the protective light of the silver-robed being. Memories, emotions, instincts, everything spilled into his mind. He saw glimpses of the custodian's origin, forged in the heart of a pre-human star, entrusted with the protection of nascent life, witnessing betrayal, learning despair, and he understood, in a moment of painful clarity, that the being they faced was not evil. It was consequence, unyielding, remorseless, perfect in its execution of duty. "Do not take them," Nara whispered aloud, her voice carrying beyond the cocoon, amplified by the psychic resonance. "Do not touch them." For a heartbeat, the custodian paused. It extended one massive arm, scanning, reaching, but not striking. The golden light from the silver-robed being flared in response, enveloping it, flowing into the obsidian armor as if it were conversing in a language older than speech, older than thought. The ground beneath them cracked, splintering crystal shards into massive spires, each carrying its own charge of protective energy. Soldiers pressed forward cautiously, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing an event beyond comprehension, beyond salvation, beyond history. Every moment felt stretched, elongated into eternity. Dane gritted his teeth, holding Nara tight as he realized the impossibility of what was unfolding. "It's listening," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's actually listening." Varos, ever the pragmatist, tightened her grip on her blade. "It's deciding, not destroying, but what is the price if it chooses wrong?" The custodian's arms slowly lowered, energy crackling but steadying, its head tilted, a silent acknowledgement of the silver-robed being's influence. Dane's heart pounded. Could it be possible? Could a being of such power, a remnant of humanity's forgotten dawn, be persuaded? Then the silver-robed being cried out, voice echoing across the plains, tearing through the psychic resonance like a blade. "I remember you. I remember your purpose. You were made to protect, not to destroy. You were forged in the image of hope, not despair." The custodian paused, its form flickering with uncertainty. And in that instant, the psychic energy from Nara, channeled through Dane's desperate resolve, surged forward. The cocoon of golden light expanded violently, forming a living lattice around them, merging with the energy of the world itself. The soldiers, trembling and terrified, felt their courage return as the protective lattice reinforced itself. Guided by the will of both the silver-robed being and the humans it sought to shield, the custodian's red sigils flared in response, energy coiling around its form, and for the first time Dane saw hesitation, not weakness but recognition. It was seeing what it had been before it became an instrument of judgment, glimpsing the fragments of hope and creation it had long forgotten. Dane's vision blurred, pain lancing through him, as the psychic energy intertwined with the world, with Nara, with the silver-robed being, forming a resonance that felt like the pulse of life itself. Crystalline spires bent protectively, the silver planes thrummed in response, and the custodian's massive form wavered, caught between destruction and remembrance. Then, slowly, impossibly, it knelt. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The energy surrounding it contracted, red and black pulses softening. Its head bowed, helmet gleaming, a silent communication with the silver-robed being, a recognition of what it had been made for and what it had nearly forgotten. Dane felt the world shift beneath him. The psychic pressure subsided slightly. Nara's energy, though still overwhelming, became harmonious, weaving with the cocoon's golden light. Soldiers staggered upright, unsure whether to feel relief or terror at the incomprehensible display of power. Varos whispered, voice trembling, It's stopping. It's listening to her." The silver-robed being stepped closer to the custodian, golden light flowing between them like molten strands of memory and purpose. "We are bound," it said softly, voice trembling with emotion. "By creation, by loss, by hope. You will not destroy what we have made. You will not take them." The custodian's massive head moved slightly, a nod. Energy flared and then stabilized, crackling less violently. For the first time in millennia, the executioner of humanity's fate seemed human. Dane dropped to his knees, exhausted, gripping Nara as her psychic aura ebbed slightly. Around him, soldiers exhaled, fear mingling with awe. The world itself trembled one final time, as if confirming the truce that had been forged, a fragile understanding that life, even against impossible odds, would persist. Yet even as relief washed over them, Dane felt a tremor in the air, a whisper beneath the roar of psychic energy. He could sense that the custodian's decision was not final, that the balance between judgment and mercy was still precarious. And then, without warning, the silver-robed being screamed, a sound that split the psychic resonance. "Run! Now! They are awakening fully!" The ground beneath them erupted in brilliant shards of light and shadow. Dane grabbed Nara, pulling her to her feet. Soldiers followed, hearts pounding, minds straining against the psychic onslaught. The custodian rose once more, towering, imposing, intent unreadable, yet undeniably present. The world shuddered violently. The very foundations of existence seemed to quiver, and the humans ran. The silver plains fractured beneath their feet as Arlen Dane bolted forward, cradling Nara Voss in his arms. Her psychic aura pulsed violently, her every breath vibrating with raw energy, and yet Dane could feel a strange harmony beginning to form between her power and the protective light of the silver-robed being. Soldiers stumbled behind him, boots slipping on jagged crystalline surfaces that seemed to shift and writhe with a life of their own. Every step forward felt like running on the edge of a blade that cut not flesh but reality itself. The custodian followed, massive and relentless, yet there was hesitation in its every step now, as if it were learning, recalculating the essence of humanity that flowed through the small group in its path. Nara's whispers reached Dane's mind, fractured words that carried meaning beyond comprehension. "It knows, but listens, still." Her voice, amplified by psychic resonance, projected over the plains like a fragile plea against the cosmic storm surrounding them. Dane's heart seized. He understood now that survival would not be won through arms or armor, but through understanding, through recognition of the fragile humanity that dared to exist at the feet of beings older than stars. The silver-robed being surged ahead of them, forming protective arcs of molten light that cut through the chaos, shielding the humans from energy tendrils the custodian could not fully suppress. The battlefield shifted continuously, crystalline towers bending and folding to create labyrinthine corridors of protection. Every structure was alive, every pulse of energy a living heartbeat intertwined with the psychic aura of Nara. Soldiers clung to their positions, staggering, their senses overwhelmed, yet instinctively aware that the lattice of light offered the only chance of survival. Then came the deep, resonant hum, a vibration felt in the marrow of their bones rather than heard with ears. It emanated from the custodian, resonating outward, bending the silver plains, warping the protective lattice around them. Dane felt his soul twist in response. It was a pulse of judgment, an inquiry into the worth of every life on the field, every act of creation and destruction. And yet, intertwined with it was hesitation, a questioning note that made the very air shimmer with possibility. "We cannot outrun it," Varos shouted, voice raw, eyes wide as the ground beneath her twisted with every step. "We need to confront it, or we die in this shifting nightmare." Dane gritted his teeth, feeling the psychic pressure against his skull, the tremor of aeons pressing into his chest. "Then we confront it, not with violence, but with understanding. Nara, now." He lifted her into the lattice of light, allowing her raw energy to merge with the protective glow. Nara's psychic presence surged, a wave of power that bent the fabric of the silver plains. She reached out, not in attack, but in recognition, probing the mind of the custodian with a plea older than memory. Images flashed before Dane's eyes, the forging of the custodian in stellar fires, the shaping of its purpose, the betrayal of trust, the weight of millennia spent executing judgment without question. He saw its loneliness, its sorrow, the perfect logic of destruction turned inward by empathy it had never allowed itself to feel. The custodian paused, its massive form trembling as the psychic resonance washed over it. Red sigils flickered and pulsed, but instead of aggression, they twisted into something resembling contemplation. Dane stumbled, staggering under the intensity of the psychic feedback, but he sensed what Nara was doing, reaching past the obsidian shell, touching the memory of a being that had once been the mirror of humanity's highest ideals. Then the custodian moved, not toward destruction, but toward connection. Its massive hand hovered above Nara, trembling slightly, tendrils of black energy writhing in anticipation, and Dane saw the light, the merging of its power with Nara's, the tentative, fragile recognition of shared purpose, of the continuity between creator and creation. The silver-robed being collapsed to one knee, golden light draining slowly into the ground as the tension of maintaining the lattice became unbearable. "It listens, it understands, it chooses," it whispered, voice breaking with exhaustion. The custodian lowered its hand fully onto the ground, kneeling, the red sigils fading to a soft pulse. The world shuddered in response. Crystalline towers bent protectively, the silver plains settled, and the air itself seemed to sigh. Dane staggered, gripping Nara tight, trying to comprehend the impossibility they had survived. Soldiers wept openly, unable to reconcile relief with the awe that threatened to crush their minds. And then the custodian spoke, not in judgment, not in fury, but in a voice that resonated deep in the souls of all present. "I remember, I see, I protect." Dane felt a surge of disbelief. Protection, not execution. Recognition, not obliteration. The being, older than stars, the true architect of humanity, had acknowledged not just its creations, but their worth. The silver-robed being rose, weary but steady, light radiating from it like the dawn of a new era. "It is done," it said softly. "We are reconciled. For now." Nara collapsed into Dane's arms, exhaustion overwhelming her, but the psychic energy that pulsed from her was no longer chaotic. It was ordered, harmonious, a beacon of potential that threaded through the silver plains and into the very air. Dane hugged her tightly, every muscle quivering from adrenaline, relief, and awe. Around them, soldiers began to move cautiously, sensing the fragile peace that had settled, understanding that they had survived not through strength, but through empathy, through recognition of the value of life itself. Yet Dane knew the truth. The custodian's choice was not final. It had listened, yes, but it remained a force of judgment, a being whose perspective stretched beyond mortal comprehension. Humanity had survived a moment that could have ended all, but they had not yet earned reprieve. They had only postponed the reckoning. Varos knelt beside Dane, voice barely a whisper. "We made it, but at what cost? How many worlds still lie in its path?" Dane shook his head, staring out across the fractured plains, glittering with energy, both alive and alien. "We survived because we understood, because we reached for what it had forgotten. But it watches, always, and someday it will act again." The custodian lifted its head, black armor glinting, red sigils fading into a soft glow. Its gaze swept across the humans, lingering on Dane, on Nara, on the soldiers who had stood firm in terror and hope alike. And then, impossibly, it vanished, melting into the air like a memory, leaving only the echoes of power and the faint shimmer of reality as it had been. The silver-robed being sank to the ground fully, exhausted, golden light dimming. "It is not over," it whispered, voice hoarse. "It never is. But you have seen, you have survived, and in surviving, you have reminded it, and yourself, of what humanity is meant to be." Dane helped Nara to her feet, looking out across the silver plains, now settling into an eerie calm. The crystalline towers hummed softly, protective energy still lingering like the pulse of a living heart. Soldiers, shaken but alive, began to regroup, understanding that they had witnessed something no history could record, no memory fully capture. They had seen the true creator of humanity and survived the encounter. And as Dane gazed at the horizon of fractured light light and shadow. He understood this was only the beginning. Humanity had faced its genesis, stared into the face of its origin, and lived. The lessons, the consequences, the memories of that encounter would echo through the galaxy for millennia. And though the custodian had not destroyed them, it had left an indelible mark, an understanding that every action, every choice, every flicker of life was observed, measured, and remembered. Nara whispered, voice trembling but resolute. We survived, but the weight of knowing will never leave us. Dane nodded. He did not respond. Words were inadequate. No words could capture the magnitude of what they had endured, of what they had witnessed, of what they had survived. All they could do was move forward, bearing the knowledge that humanity's true creator had looked upon them and, perhaps, seen potential. And in that silent understanding, the silver plains pulsed one final time, as if the world itself were breathing, acknowledging that for now at least, the reckoning had passed.